This video is probably going to be very lengthy, so there's going to be timestamps for each curse technique below. But what I do want to say off the start is I am going to be ranking these curse techniques as if I'm ranking them against each other. So let's say I'm ranking tool manipulation. I'm going to be comparing tool manipulation against curse techniques like Curse Queen, Demon Vessel, Gambler Fever, etc. The second tier list that I'm just going to put at the end of the video is going to be my opinion on curse techniques in general inside the game. So just the standalone technique, not comparing the technique to another technique. So there's going to be two versions of this tier list, and the one that I'm going to be making throughout the video is going to be curse techniques versus curse techniques, because I think it's more fun, and some people will see something in A tier and wonder why it's an A tier. So it'll cause more controversy. I also want to say this, I'm not going to be adding in the factor that you can use different moves from other curse techniques to make a certain curse technique better. It's kind of an unfair way to rank it, and to be honest, every single curse technique inside this game, you're not going to just be using the whole entire kit by itself. You are going to be mixing and matching. So this tier list, do not take it as like your ideal ranking of every single curse technique. This is just mine ranking each curse technique alone. And final point is I'll try to spend not a lot of time talking about the curse techniques because I've talked about some of them multiple times, but I probably will end up going on a ramble, and I'm sorry for that. And to start us off, we have Blazing Courage. Now, Blazing Courage inside this game, it's basically like a fire curse technique. It only has 3 skills. The first one being Blazing Slash, which is going to be absolutely useless. Your second skill actually gives you a buff to speed, and every single attack that you will do will apply burn damage, so it's pretty nice. And your third attack, which is going to be the only usable attack, being Fire Tornado. This one is like a combo extending up tilt tornado that also applies burn damage to the person that you're hitting. Overall though, this technique is pretty lackluster. I mean, it makes sense, it's an uncommon technique, and like for general standing inside the game, since the technique only has one usable skill, I'm gonna put it at the back of C tier. The only skill that you would be using from this technique is honestly just going to be Blazing Tornado, and that's really it. Now, next technique that we have is going to be Blood Manipulation. Now, Blood Manipulation, it does have a passive, and that if you hit your opponent with any blood move, they will begin to start having like red orbs hang around them. And you kind of need these orbs to use the final skill of Blood Manipulation, which is going to be Supernova. But just to start off, the skills for Blood Manipulation, it's all kind of like long range. I think the only usable skill on this would probably end up being Blood Bind, and that's just because it's like a skill that's literally binding your opponent, keeping them still. And it's only on a rare curse technique, so it's kind of alright. But Blood Manipulation, it kind of lacks in damage and even combos at that point. I think your only combo could probably be like an M1 into what, Blood Disc, but even still, when Blood Disc is coming back on the second part, it's not like it's true or something. You would just use this technique to kind of apply pressure, and if you are using this technique all alone, it's honestly just not that good. It's a rare inside this game, so you can't really expect much from it. I feel like the only usable skill for this technique would probably just end up being Bloodbind, and that's just because it's like a free stun. So I'm honestly going to be placing Blood Manipulation like at the front of C tier, because when you're comparing it to every other technique, it really just falls short. I feel like there can be a lot more done with Blood Manipulation because of the ways it was used inside of the actual manga and the show itself. You can do a lot with Blood Manipulation, but for this game specifically, it's not that good of a technique by itself. It's just like kind of alright. It's definitely better than Blazing Courage. I feel like as this tier list moves on, you might see me bump it up to like the back of B tier, but for now I'm just going to put it at the front of C tier to be safe. Now, next technique that we have is going to be Boogie Woogie. For this specific technique, I honestly thought that they would be doing a lot more with it, but it's pretty simple inside this game, although it actually is very, very usable. Now, the whole entire kit for Boogie Woogie, it's Percussive Missile, you have your classic Boogie Woogie swap, you have Evasive Swap, Pebble Swap, and you also have Counter Suplex. Throughout all those skills, the only ones that you're going to be using most likely is kind of Swap or Evasive Swap. Now, one thing to note about Swap inside this game is that if you swap with your opponent, any projectile that they throw at you will also hit them. So let's say that you're fighting somebody in ranked and they're using like Maximum Meteor and they're throwing it at you. If you are to swap with that person, the Maximum Meteor will probably end up hitting them. Although you do have to keep in mind that the range for swap is honestly not going to be that huge. So it's not like you'll be able to swap with a person who's going to be standing really far away from you using the attacks that you would actually want to swap against, like Hollow Purple, Maximum Meteor, Cleave, Dispense, all the like huge techniques that are just going to be doing a lot of damage. But the skill redirecting the damage to the person or allowing them to get hit by it is still honestly very good. Now the next skill that you would probably use from this technique is just going to be evasive swap. And the way this one works is kind of interesting because if you marked an opponent, you can swap with them by using this move. So like, let's say that you mark somebody, you can bring them along with you. So I'm honestly going to put Boogie Woogie, like, I'm gonna put it in the middle of C tier. And honestly, I'm gonna bump Blood Manipulation up because I definitely do think it's better than both the Boogie Woogie and Blazing Courage. But the Boogie Woogie, the swaps inside this game, they don't even like allow you to swap from super duper far away, which means you would just be swapping close range, and it's not like somebody's going to be using a ranged projectile close range in front of your face. So technique kind of does fall short inside this game, even though it's like super duper cool. Our next technique that we have is going to be Clone Manipulation. Now, Clone Manipulation, this technique, you're basically going to be using it for one skill, and that's just form clones. It does have two other skills, which is going to be Clone Toss, where you kind of do like a combo with the clone and knock them up and down inside the air. And then you also have Clone Swap, allowing you to swap places with one of your clones. But the main reason as to why anybody would be using this technique is just going to be to form the clones and put pressure on their opponent. Now, this to me is honestly the only usable common inside this game. The purpose of this technique, I feel like, is to just spawn the two clones and create pressure for the person that you're fighting. If you're going to be using this technique, you're going to be using this technique for the one skill alone. But cloning as a technique completely by itself, I'm probably going to place it at the top of C tier. And the only reason as to why I'm doing this is really just because you can spawn clones and just apply pressure to whoever you're fighting. This technique would probably only be like a PvP technique. For PvE, I don't even know why you would be using cloning, but comparing cloning to Boogie Woogie and Blazing Courage, cloning has like one usable skill as well, and that one usable skill is also better than these two. But cloning in general, I feel like there's only one reason as to why you're going to be using it, and that's just to create clones of yourself, which will always be annoying having you like have multiple M1s hitting a person at once. And the next technique is going to be Construction. This technique sucks. It's the worst technique inside the game. I'm placing it in D tier. I'll give you a very brief explanation for it. The only skill in Construction that you basically have is just going to be Pistol. Every other skill sucks. Like, there is no reason to be using these skills at all. Don't use Construction. I don't even know if I should elaborate. Please don't use Construction. The next curse technique we have is going to be Cryokinesis, and you also can just call this Ice. Now for Cryokinesis, this technique is honestly super duper good. As a standalone rare, I feel like this is probably going to end up being the best rare inside the game, probably only competing with like one of them, and this technique is actually very usable. Now the whole entire moveset for it, I'm pretty sure that every single skill applies freeze, and when you freeze your opponent, you have like a brief second to kind of combo extend and do your whole entire combos on that opponent. This technique is also going to end up getting a maximum eventually. There was a brief period where you could use the maximum inside like the tester stage, and it was like Frost to impact maximum. But essentially, the maximum is just going to be a very huge, gigantic glacier. So this technique is honestly super duper good. I feel like this is one of the rare techniques that you can actually end up using in PvP as like an assistance to your build if you're going like a strength type of build, or you're just going to be using like your hands and fighting people. Cryokinesis is actually a very good technique, and I'm going to put it at the front of B tier for now. Like I said, you're just going to be using this to kind of like create combos and freeze the opponent. It's not doing high damage, but it does stun the person, which is what you want to be using this technique for, and it's pretty nice for that. Definitely a very good and solid rare inside this game. And the next curse technique we have is going to be Curse Queen, also the first special grade on this tier list. And this curse technique is very good. Like, it is an extremely good curse technique. So off rip, I'm gonna try not to spend too much time talking about this curse technique because I have done it like multiple times inside separate videos, but for a general like rating of it, this technique is super duper good. It is extremely good. I feel like this special grade, it might not be the best out of all the special grades, but one thing that this technique does kind of excel in is kind of like creating pressure against whoever you're fighting or whatever boss you're grinding, and just doing like poke damage. Well, not necessarily poke damage, but it's just a very solid technique that you can rely on. This curse technique for PvP is honestly going to be like, well, you probably have like 3 to 4 usable skills. Ghastly Fist is one of those extremely good skills because it's like you can summon it inside of a range, you can stand there and camp it yourself, or you can just like catch your opponent off guard with it. And along with that, you can also copy the person's curse technique and take one of their skills from it. So let's say that they use Hollow Purple and then you use Copy right after that, you can take their Hollow Purple. Along with that, it does have a domain expansion and a very, very good maximum technique. One of the best maximum techniques inside the game being Jacob's Ladder. And just like this technique is just really, really good. It is an extremely good curse technique and definitely worthy of being a special grade. So if you want more of like a in-depth dive on this curse technique, I'll like link 2 videos, or I just linked the video up inside the corner right hand so you can see me talk about it more. But I'm putting this technique in S tier. Like, this is straight up just a very good curse technique. If you get Curse Queen, you're probably gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. Jacob's Ladder is such a good thing to use, and in general this technique is just really good. The next curse technique that we have is going to be Cursed Speech. Now, me saying those words is probably the first time you've even heard somebody talk about cursed speech inside this game. This curse technique is a rare, and you've never seen it. You probably don't even know it's inside the game. And the reason as to why is just because of how lackluster this curse technique actually is. So just overall, one huge downside that this curse technique has to me is just going to be the range of like every single skill. The curse technique, it doesn't do damage, and I feel like the one only usable skill for it would just be the stun one that's don't move. But even still, you kind of have to be right in front of the NPC or person that you're fighting's face to use this curse technique. This curse technique is honestly just like lackluster. It lacks damage. It lacks like, I mean, stunning the opponent, if you want to count that. Like I'm saying like freezing or status effects. Overall, the curse technique is not good. The only way that the curse technique gets range is by using Megaphone. And even when you do use Megaphone, it's not like it's worthy of taking up a skill slot inside the game. Overall, the curse technique is just pretty bad. I'm honestly gonna place it like I'm gonna place it behind cloning inside C tier. It's just curse speech. Like, the technique just sucks. Like, overall, I really do feel like if you're using cloning for its right purpose, which is going to be using the clones, you would honestly do better than using curse speech. This curse technique just sucks. I feel like the only reason as to why somebody would even use this is because they spinned and they ended up getting curse speech for their last spin and they can't reroll off of it. I've literally never seen this technique be used inside the game before, like ever. Now, the next curse technique that we have is going to be Demon, Vessel, or Shrine. One of the best curse techniques inside the game. It's going in S tier, I can tell you that already. But for Demon Vessel, this curse technique is kind of just like an all-rounder. You can kind of do everything with this curse technique. You can do grinding, you can do PvP, you can do PvE. This curse technique is just super duper good. So this curse technique has like 2 modes. You have Switch, which just gives you a 25% increase on damage and defense, which is honestly just super duper good to have in general. This curse technique also has a domain expansion being Malevolent Shrine, one of the best domains for not only grinding, but also PvP inside this game. And then to top it off, this curse technique's maximum is just going to be absolutely insane. You can use World Cleave. Although you can only use World Cleave once inside your mode, the damage from World Cleave is like anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000. Just like World Cleave is absolutely insane. If you get the Malevolent Shrine, or if you get the curse technique, you just know every single skill on this technique is usable. You can use any skill on this technique and make good use of it, even outside of this technique. This is just a usable curse technique. Honestly, I'm going to place Demon Vessel at the front of S tier for right now, because it is 1000% better than Curse Queen overall as a curse technique. And you should know that if you use Demon Vessel, which I feel like a good amount of people have at the current state that the game's in, like what, a week and a half or 2 weeks after release. Anyways, Demon Vessel, super duper good curse technique. You cannot go wrong with it. It is extremely good. Next curse technique that we have is going to be Gambler Fever. Now, this curse technique is going to kind of be like a RNG circus type curse technique. One thing to note off rip with this curse technique is that the main thing, or the main focus of this curse technique, is going to be popping your domain expansion. So to also help aid on to that, your domain expansion is the only one that can be cast inside this game without needing to fill up your domain meter, meaning you can start a fight off and pop your domain expansion. Now, the main goal for this curse technique is going to be getting your infinite RCT mode, or your infinite HP mode is what I like to call it, or just basically hitting jackpot. If you're able to hit jackpot inside of this curse technique, you literally become unkillable. Your HP is maximum. You're just like a huge beast, bum rushing whatever you're fighting, and it's honestly super duper good. For grinding, this curse technique, you will almost always hit jackpot 1,000,000% for grinding. So for PvE, this curse technique is super duper good. And for PvP, I also do feel like it's usable, although there is kind of like counter to the domain expansion, which is kind of just like running away from the person. But your domain only has a 45-second cooldown, even if you don't get jackpot within the first domain. So you just have to wait 45 seconds, and by the time your second domain, you should be at like a guaranteed jackpot state. Even still, Gambler Fever is honestly a super duper good curse technique. I really do feel like the only places that it falls short in would honestly just be like damage and combos. Your only combo extender for this curse technique is honestly just going to be like closing curtains or just like the train door slam. Like your only combo extender, so combos isn't really going to be much for this curse technique. And the damage for it is also pretty alright. It's not going to be doing the most damage, but it's also not going to be doing the least. So in general, I think I'm just going to put Gambler Fever, like, I think I'm gonna put it at the pinnacle of A tier. And when I mean the pinnacle, I'm talking like the tippity top. The only thing holding it back from S tier to me is just the fact that you're solely reliant on hitting this jackpot state. So if you're inside a fight and the person is just inherently better than you and they know how to counter you inside your domain and you don't hit the jackpot state, then I feel like this curse technique is not going to be as easy to carry the person using it compared to something like Demon Vessel or Curse Queen. Now, the next curse technique is going to be one of my personal favorites, and this is just going to be Hydrokinesis. Now, Hydrokinesis, one thing to note about this curse technique is that it does have a passive, and this is going to be the wet effect. And what this passive does is whenever you land one of your skills, it will just cause your opponent to do less damage to you and also make them move slower. So this passive is honestly a pretty good passive for the curse technique. And I feel like the only place where this curse technique falls short is just going to be the actual skills on this technique. Now, if you're using this curse technique to kind of just create pressure on your opponent and just catch them off guard, I feel like you can use it in that way. Piranha Swarm is a curse, is one of the skills on this curse technique, and it shoots out like these super fast, tiny projectiles of piranhas, but it does knock the person back, although it also does apply the wet status effect. So if you use this skill to like kind of put that status effect on the person and not necessarily to like do damage or combo extend, then it would be a pretty good skill from this curse technique. Around in general, I just think that this curse technique is like good. I'm definitely not as high on it as I would like to be because it is my favorite curse technique inside the game, or my second favorite curse technique inside the game. But it honestly does just like, it's just a solid curse technique. Eel Bind is like your only combo extender. Along with that, the domain expansion is also super cool, and I just love Death Swarm. Inside this domain expansion, if you use Death Swarm on the person, you're going to be doing like so much damage to them, and it's unblockable unless they use like Simple Domain or Hollow Wicker Basket. So this curse technique is honestly very good. I'm not as high on it as I was like before or in previous videos, putting this curse technique in like the middle or the back of A tier. Currently, it's just going to be here. The curse technique is good, and if you have it, you can use it, but it's not going to be like the best and just shine really bright compared to every other curse technique inside this game. Our next curse technique that we have is going to be Infinity. And this curse technique, you already know, it's going to be an automatic S tier. This is one of those curse techniques that just has everything. This curse technique literally has everything. Infinity, it has damage, it has stuns, it has combos. It even, I don't want to call it an evasive, but you have moving iframes. This curse technique has quite literally everything. Red Transmission is one of the best skills inside this game. It's honestly like the most fastest combo extending catch off guard person ever. It's a super fast red that you shoot at a person, which also auto tracks, and it TPs you to them. So creating combos with this curse technique is going to be super duper good. Along with that, if you're more focused on grinding inside the game, this curse technique has skills that just like hit groups of NPCs while also doing damage. And then when you pop the maximum for this curse technique, you have Hollow Nuke, which is probably going to be one of the best maximums inside this game. Along with that, your blue and reds are also just really reliable and do so much damage. Overall, this curse technique, it literally has everything. We all know what Hollow Purple is. This is honestly just like a skill that's going to decimate your opponent or NPC. Whatever you hit with this Hollow Purple is going to do damage no matter what. Infinity, I'm honestly gonna I am gonna place at top of S tier. This curse technique is probably just like, compared to every other curse technique, if there's one curse technique that you can use and you can be confident with this whole entire kit, Infinity is going to be the best. It has everything a person would want, and you can literally just use the whole curse technique. It's super duper good. Now, next curse technique we have is going to be Judgeman. Now, Judgeman, I actually like this curse technique. It's focused around the character called Higuruma. Just to keep it very brief and not really spoil you, this curse technique is kind of just going to be based on like a courtroom lawyer type of court technique. Really weird way to word it. but the technique is honestly, it's pretty alright. Now this is a legendary, so you can't really expect much from it, but for a legendary, the technique is pretty good. I feel like this technique is also mainly focused towards people who want to use it for PvP, with most of the skills not having a lot of AoE and mainly being like combo skills or used to like silence your opponent. And by silence, I'm really referring to the skill called Confiscation. If you use this curse technique, you grab your opponent and you basically restrict them from being able to use any curse technique skills that they have. So this curse technique is definitely going to be a more PvP orientated curse technique, and I feel like that's what you should be using it for. For PvE, I wouldn't be so confident on this curse technique, and the main thing I do want to make point of for this curse technique is honestly going to be the domain expansion being deadly sentencing. Now for this domain expansion, to keep it very brief, if you win, you get the Executioner Sword, which basically means you're going to win the fight. This sword does insane amounts of damage, skills could do like up to 5k. I think this sword is probably comparable to like, imagine that you had a portable world cleave inside of your hand that you can use at free will against anybody inside a domain expansion. I think that's the best way to word it. It's like you have a maximum inside your hand that you can M1 with. So overall, Higuruma's curse technique, Judgeman, I'm going to put it in the, I'm going to put it at the back of A tier, because this curse technique is only for people who are going to be PvPing. You can use it for PvE, but it's not going to be the best. I feel like Hydrokinesis does slightly edge it more overall as a curse technique, but if it's just for PvP, I would have Judgment in front of Hydrokinesis. But since it's not, I'm going to put Judgment at the back of A tier. It's a legendary and it's good, so yeah. Now next curse technique we have is going to be Nanumi's curse technique, also being Ratio. Now Ratio, this curse technique, it's pretty good. People have actually discovered that this curse technique is very good for grinding because of the amount of damage that you do to any NPC. This curse technique has a skill called 7-3 Strike, where you apply a 2-second debuff on your opponent, and this lowers their defense by 50%. Now, this debuff does only work for Ratio like skills, so if you're going to be using this skill, you're going to have to also be using another skill from Ratio to basically take advantage of that 50% debuff. But overall, this curse technique is pretty alright. It's a rare curse technique, so you can't expect much from it. But for what this curse technique does, which is damage, I feel like it does pretty good at that. I think that this curse technique is honestly just pretty reliable. I'm going to put it in front of Blood Manipulation inside B tier, but overall, I don't think it's better than Cryokinesis. For rare though, it is pretty good because people have used it for PvE. Now, the next curse technique that we have is going to be Soul Manipulation. Also one of my favorites inside this game. And Soul Manipulation, it's a special grade, so you should be rating it hardest. And for a special grade, it's pretty good. I'm kind of saying that in a way where it's like I'm confident on it being good, but I'm also confident on it not being good. And the main reason as to why I'm saying this is because I feel like this curse technique, the main thing that you really want to do with it, or the main thing that you really want to get away with when using this curse technique, is going to be like applying your Transfiguration stacks. Now, you apply your Transfiguration stacks from landing your skills, and essentially after that, you have to land the person, or you have to hit the person that you're fighting with Soul Touch to proc these stacks and just do your huge amounts of damage for it. Standalone, the skills for this curse technique are not going to be doing a lot of damage. If I'm being completely honest, the only skill that does do like good damage inside this curse technique is going to be Deformed Fist. Outside of that, every other skill, it feels like it's there to just assist you on putting stacks on the person, and then you using Soul Touch to burst those stacks. And even still, when I was fighting people in ranked with this curse technique, trying to use Soul Touch on them, the range for Soul Touch is not that huge, and if you do miss Soul Touch, you have huge amounts of end lag. So if you miss Soul Touch, you will be punished for missing Soul Touch. This curse technique is pretty good. I just really don't even like the domain expansion because it's like, you can use Soul Touch anywhere inside the domain expansion, but if you use Soul Touch on somebody who doesn't have any of the Transfiguration stacks on them, your Soul Touch does like 250 damage while also being inside your domain expansion. 250 damage inside this game is nothing. Like it's honestly nothing. Honestly, I'm really mixed on this curse technique. I'm personally going to put it like in the middle of A tier, behind Gambler Fever, but in front of Hydrokinesis and Judgeman. You can probably even make the argument that Hydrokinesis is better than Soul Manipulation overall, but like this curse technique is literally reliant on landing stacks, so if you don't land those stacks, then the curse technique isn't that good to me. I still like it, I still use it, I have a domain expansion for it. even though I'm rating it this harsh, but yeah. Next curse technique that we have is going to be Star Rage. Now I feel like every single time that I talk about Star Rage, I just find out something new. In general, this might be the best curse technique inside the game, right behind Infinity to me. This curse technique, I feel like the main thing for it would just be damage. And to add on to that, you have this mass meter, and basically when you fill up this mass meter, you enter like this little brief mode where two of your skills become amplified. And these amplified skills honestly just like chuck the opponent. It's honestly such an insane curse technique when it comes to damage. This curse technique, I've been using it for grinding, and this curse technique helps me to solo Toji in like 1 minute and 10 seconds, or even 50 seconds if I'm able to get lucky. This curse technique is just really good. It's probably, like I said, the second best curse technique inside the game to me. I feel like the only downside on this curse technique is just going to be the fact that your maximum does damage to you. But then even when I made the video talking about it, a lot of people have been telling me ways to avoid taking damage from the maximum itself. The domain expansion for this curse technique, it applies a 10% debuff on the person, and all of your skills act like the mass meter filled skills for this whole entire domain expansion, which basically means you have amplified skills that already do a lot of damage inside the domain expansion while also reducing the person's defense inside the domain expansion. This curse technique is good. It's honestly like probably the highest damaging curse technique if we're taking into account every single skill. I'm going to put this curse technique number 2 in S tier, right in front of Demon Vessel. If you use like Infinity, Star Rage, Demon Vessel, this is like your big 3. I have Infinity slightly over it because it does have like a moving iframe skill, and because Infinity is just Infinity itself is like really good. But Star Rage is right behind Infinity to me. It's honestly a very good curse technique and you cannot go wrong with it. Now next curse technique we have is going to be the hidden special grade, being Straw Doll. Yeah, no, this is Straw Doll. This curse technique is from Nobara, and the whole point of this curse technique is to kind of like land your nails on the person, and just like I don't even know what the point of this curse technique is, because it sucks. This curse technique sucks. You have a combo extender being Squeaky Strike. It doesn't do a lot of damage to the person, but it does allow you to create a combo. So if you use this curse technique and you like use this skill trying to do a combo for it, since it doesn't do a lot of damage, it wouldn't fill the person's meter up a lot more, and it would allow you to reset your actual high damaging combo. But outside of that, like using the resonance for this curse technique, or like trying to land hairpin for this curse technique, and you land hairpin by like applying nails to the person and just in general poking at the person, what I would call it, this curse technique sucks for that. I'm gonna put this curse technique like in the middle of C tier. I'm gonna put it behind Boogie Woogie, but in front of Blazing Courage, and that's only because Squeaky Strike is a pretty decent combo extender. I feel like you can just run this one skill and just hit the opponent and then continue doing what you actually want to do, like comboing them with the more better curse technique. The next curse technique we have is going to be Tool Manipulation. It only has one usable skill to me, and that to me is going to be Broom, where you essentially fly around super duper fast, and that's pretty much it. I feel like you can make a use for Broom. Let's say that you see somebody about to pop domain expansion, so you use Broom and you fly away. But you do have to keep in mind that besides this, the only other usable skills on this curse technique is nothing. Absolutely nothing. This curse technique cannot do anything else besides use Broom and fly away, which is why it's going to be going in D tier right next to Construction. I'm gonna place it in front of Construction because Broom is a pretty fast skill, surprisingly, but outside of that, this curse technique sucks. Don't use it. And now we have the final curse technique, also what I think is one of the most underrated curse techniques inside this game, and that's going to be Volcano. Now Volcano is one of those curse techniques that I feel like is underrated because it's attached to the character who used the actual Volcano, being Jogo. But this curse technique is just super duper reliable. It is honestly one of the best curse techniques inside this game, surprisingly. Not only because of the maximum, but also because of the status effect that this curse technique does apply to the person, which is going to be burn. Like this curse technique, it does burn damage and it does it very well. Every single skill will apply burn damage to the person. And along with that, this curse technique also has very good AoE coverage. This curse technique is just very good. It's a very good curse technique. If you use a domain expansion, you can honestly use one of your skills. I'm pretty sure it's Molten Chamber, and this will just allow like huge magma puddles to appear inside domain expansion. Along with that, your maximum technique is very good itself. It's a huge meteor that does anywhere from 5k to 6k damage, and you're not going to be dodging this meteor. I think the best way to avoid this meteor would to honestly be using a skill that gives you iframes, like Infinity Mugen or Hollow Purple, something like that. This technique is honestly very good, and I'm personally going to put it, and I don't know if I want to put it at the top of A tier in front of Gambler Fever, or if I want to put it at the back of S tier. But this curse technique is good. I think I'm just gonna put it at the top of A tier. I feel like the only place where it will probably lack in would just be doing like huge amounts of damage, but then you will also like factor in the burn damage. I don't know. This curse technique is honestly really good, and I do feel more comfortable having it at like the leader of A tier. But this is going to be my personal overall list for curse techniques versus curse techniques. Honestly, I think this is pretty great, like ranking for me. You have Infinity leading it, Star Rage second, Demon Vessel third, Curse Queen fourth. I feel like everything in S tier is super duper good, along with anything in A tier really. I don't want to make it seem like I'm like downplaying them because of the tiers that it's in. But then when you get below that, there's only like 3 usable rares inside this game. And C and below, to me, it's like they only have one gimmick that you would probably take away. And yeah, it's just like not really that great. But this is my tier list for curse techniques versus curse techniques. Let me know what you actually think about this inside the comments. I did try to keep the explanations brief because I recorded the first version of this and it was an hour long, and even I wouldn't want to watch an hour-long ranking video. But this is my first tier list, and this would be my tier list for curse techniques as a stand-alone curse technique inside this game, meaning I'm not comparing it to anything else. One thing that I do really want to make like a note of for people who are like just initially seeing this and probably getting like a judgment from it, the gap from legendaries to rare inside this game is honestly huge. If I could, I would add like a B.5 tier in the middle of A and just name it gap, like just name it complete gap. Once you hit legendaries inside this game, I feel like those are the only things that you're probably just going to want to use. Like I said before, there is some things that you can take away from every single curse technique to kind of create like the ultimate hybrid kit. But if I was ranking it that way, this tier list would honestly be infinite with infinite possibilities. Well, not infinite, but it would have a lot of possibilities. Overall though, curse techniques inside this game, anything in S tier to me is just like beautiful, absolutely beautiful, reliable curse techniques. A tier, I think is honestly like an 8 out of 10, like super good curse techniques that you can't get away with using. And then you reach rares and below, like you can literally see there is no rare past B tier. Cryokinesis is the closest one, and I feel like the maximum might also expand it more. But in general, this is just my ranking for curse techniques standalone, and then you also have the tier list for curse techniques themselves. Besides that, let me know what you actually think of this. To the people who just skip to the end, I guess you can just go and rate my rankings for these, even though you probably won't understand the reasoning as to why I did some of them. But even still, I do appreciate you watching this video. Let me actually know what your personal tier list would be. I feel like more people would probably change around like the order of some of the things in S tier, maybe lower Infinity, and just like put Star Rage at number 1, because to me it seems like Star Rage is the most loved curse technique inside this game. But besides that, thank you for watching this video. If you used it as like a way to gain an insight on which curse technique you want to use, hopefully I did explain it well enough for you. And yeah, I appreciate you watching. Thanks.